Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Gaura Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. No, you can. Okay. Same. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Gaura Purnima. Does anyone not know what Gaura Purnima is? Everyone knows what Purnima is. The appearance day of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is coming in 2 days. And I thought I'd like to read from the biography of his life, one of the biographies about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. A section of his life that's his youthful pastime. There are phases of his life. Maybe most celebrated is when he took sannyas. But before he took sannyas, he was born, he was a teacher, a grammar teacher, Sanskrit grammar teacher. He was born the son of Jagannath Mishra and Sachimata. Jagannath Mishra and Sachimata. Jagannath Mishra was most prominent, perhaps the most prominent Brahmana in the whole community of Brahmanas. Navadwip at that time was kind of like Harvard and MIT. It was a seat of high learning throughout the whole of the holy places. It was known like that. And the Vaishnavism had kind of faded. And so it wasn't just devotees or Vaishnavas, devotees of Lord Vishnu. there were a lot of demigod and demigoddess worshippers and scholars of the Vedas in different ways, but a seat of high learning. When Nimai, he was given the name Nimai by the wife of Advaita Acharya. Her name was Sita, same as Sita Ram. Sita. She knew that Mother Sachi had lost 6 sons shortly after they were born. They died. There was one son older. His name was Vishwarup. But Nimai was given the name Nimai because he was born under a neem tree. And neem, there was a kind of, besides it's has a particular value for making things taste bitter, but it's also understood to be a protection. So that he become protected by the neem tree. So thus Nimai. So many things happened in his childhood, but eventually he became a student of Gangadas Pandit. And Gangadas Pandit trained him with everything that he knew in a very short period of time, because he's the personality of God. He didn't need any training. He didn't need to go to school. But he went to school and he learned everything in a short time. So Gangadas Pandit decided to make him a teacher amongst the younger boys. And because he's the personality of Godhead, he was a super teacher. So his school grew and grew and grew and grew, and he's a very popular teacher. All the parents wanted their children, the boys, to study with Nimai because he was so good. In this period of time, it was a scholastic pastime that had its purpose in the bigger picture of what his pastimes would become later. But what we're going to hear, the feisty, challenging, not at all humble, challenging, but transcendental. It was purposeful. And he was enjoying. We'll hear as we read, just as Narayana in Narayan Rishi, Narayana enjoyed his pastime of teaching in his ashram in Badrik Ashram, so similarly Nimai was enjoying his pastime of being a teacher and being a young, kind of sassy Brahmin boy, proud of his scholarship. But it was a pastime. Part of the pastime was meant to show that scholarship is inconclusive. You'll hear. There's many places where this behavior is described. He would sometimes come, just see anybody, and he'd come and challenge them for a debate. Now, Vaishnavas don't challenge people for debate, nor they'd accept challenges. They're not interested in those kinds of things. But he was doing those kinds of things as if he was such a personality. And he would make a statement and ask them to refute it. They couldn't refute it. And then he'd refute it and establish another statement and ask them to refute the other statement. They couldn't refute the other statement. He'd refute the other statement, come back and reestablish the first statement. And and asked them to defeat the first statement. They couldn't do it. Then he did make a third statement. And like that, he was, Tarka Apratishta. So this is his childhood, or not childhood, this is his youthful pastimes as a young scholar. All glories to Mahaprabhu, Sri Gaurasundara. All glories to the followers of the Lord. I'm going to read most of the chapter 12 of Adikanda, Chaitanya Bhagavat. In this way, Sri Gaurasundara, with book in hand, always enjoyed pastimes in Navadwip. He challenged any teacher he would meet, but none of them had the power to defeat him. Although he was simply a student of grammar, he nevertheless considered the learned Bhattacharyas to be as insignificant as grass. The self-satisfied Lord traveled throughout Navadwip along with his most fortunate students. One day, by providence, the Lord met Mukunda on the road. The Lord held Mukunda's hand and spoke to him. Why do you run away as soon as you see me? Let me see how you run away today without answering me. Mukunda thought, how will I defeat him today? He is well versed only in grammar. I'll defeat him with questions on Alankara. Then he may not again display his pride before me. Thereafter, Mukunda began to ask the Lord questions. Whatever Mukunda established, the Lord would refute. Mukunda said, grammar is studied only by children. Today we should discuss Alankara. The Lord replied, as you desire. Mukunda then read some of the most difficult yet well-known verses and asked the Lord to point out any faults. The omnipotent Lord Gaurachandra then pointed out various faults in the verses. Mukunda was unable to re-establish what the Lord had refuted. Then the Lord smiled and said to him, go home for today and study your books carefully. Come early tomorrow and we'll discuss further. After Mukunda took the dust from Nimai's feet and departed, he thought, an ordinary human being cannot possess such knowledge. There is no literature that he is not conversant with. If such an intelligent person were a devotee of Krishna, then I would not leave his association for even a moment. In this way, the Lord of Vaikuntha enjoyed the life of a scholar. One day, while wandering about Navadwip, Nimai met Gadadhar. This is Gadadhar Pandit, because they were nearly the same age. The Lord smiled and he caught Gadadhar's hands and said, aren't you studying logic? Come on, let us debate. Gadadhar said, so question me. And Nimai asked, what are the symptoms of liberation? Gadadhar then explained the symptoms of liberation according to the scriptures, but Nimai countered, you don't know how to explain properly. Gadadhar then said, liberation is freedom from misery. This is the meaning of liberation according to the scriptures. Then the Lord, who is the husband of the goddess Saraswati, pointed out various faults in his statement. There was no one who could defeat his argument and silence him. No one even dared to speak with the Lord, and thus Gadadhar thought, I'll be relieved to get out of here. The Lord said, Gadadhar, you can go home today, but come early tomorrow so we can discuss some more. Gadadhar offered his respects to Nimai and went home, and Nimai continued to wander through the streets of Navadwip. Everyone considered Nimai a most learned scholar, so they treated him with awe and reverence. Every afternoon, Nimai would sit on the bank of the Ganges with his students. The Lord's body is served by Lakshmi, the daughter of the ocean, churning from the milk ocean, Lakshmi. His beauty surpasses that of Cupid, and therefore incomparable throughout the three worlds. Surrounded by his students, Sri Sachinandan would give explanations on the scriptures. In the evening, all the Vaishnavas gathered on the bank of the Ganges. As they listened to Nimai's explanations from a distance, they felt both happiness and lamentation. One of them said, "If anyone who possesses such beauty and knowledge does not worship Krishna, there is no benefit." They all replied, "Dear brother, anyone who sees him runs away in fear of facing his challenge." Someone else said, "When he sees someone, he doesn't allow him to leave. He captures him just like a tax collector captures a debtor." Another said, "This Brahmana has uncommon potency. I think he must be some great personality. Although he constantly asks shrewd questions, we still get great satisfaction just by seeing him. We have never seen such knowledge in an ordinary person. Our only regret is that he doesn't worship Krishna." The Vaishnavas all requested each other, "Bless Nimai so that his mind will be fixed on Krishna." Then they all offered their obeisances on the bank of the Ganges and blessed Nimai with a prayer. "Oh Krishna, please let this son of Jagannath Mishra become absorbed in you without deviation. Let him constantly worship you in love. Oh Lord, please let us have such association." As the Supersoul, the Lord knows the heart of all living entities. Whenever he saw devotees like Srivas, he would offer them his respects. Srivas is another one of the Panchatattva. The Lord accepted the devotee's blessings on his head. For devotional service to Lord Krishna is attained only by the blessings of the devotees. Someone also directly told Nimai, "Why are you wasting your time with mundane education?" Another person said, "Look, Nimai, what do you gain from studying? Just worship Krishna. Why do people study? Education is only for understanding devotional service to Lord Krishna. If that purpose is not served, then what is the use of your education?" The Lord smiled and said, "I am most fortunate, for you are all teaching me that devotional service to Krishna is the essence of all education. I sincerely feel that one who is blessed by all of you is most fortunate. I've already decided that after teaching a while longer, I will serve a pure devotee." After saying this, the Lord smiled at his servants. By his influence, however, no one could recognize him. In this way, Nimai attracted the heart of everyone. There was no one who escaped his power of attraction. Sometimes the Lord sat on the bank of the Ganges, and sometimes he wandered the streets of Navadwip. Whenever the residents saw the Lord, they would welcome him with great respect. When the ladies saw Gaura, they said, "Here is Cupid himself. Let women receive such a treasure, birth after birth." All the scholars saw him as equal to Brahaspati, and even elderly men offered their obeisances at his lotus feet. The yogis saw the Lord as the personification of mystic perfection, and the miscreants saw him as the personification of death. If the Lord spoke with someone just once, that person was bound by ropes of love. Although everyone heard about how the Lord was proud of his scholarship, they still loved him dearly. Even the Yavanas felt love for the Lord, for the Lord's characteristic is to show mercy to all living entities. The Lord of Vaikuntha taught his students in the courtyard of the fortunate Mukunda Sanjaya arguments, counter-arguments, establishing and refuting the meaning of a sutra. These were all explained in various ways by the son of Mother Sachi. Although they could not understand the Lord's explanations, the fortunate Mukunda Sanjaya and his family all floated in waves of ecstasy. After completing his teachings at school, the Lord of Vaikuntha arrived home, still absorbed in his scholastic pastimes. One day, on the pretext of sickness due to excessive gas, the Lord manifested transformations of ecstatic love. The Lord suddenly uttered some unworldly sounds, and he laughed as he rolled on the ground and nearly damaged the house. He roared loudly and challenged everyone like a wrestler. Then he beat whoever he could catch again and again. His entire body became stunned, and he fell unconscious in such a way that people were frightened. When Nimai's friends and relatives heard about his gastric disorder, they came running to treat him. Buddhimanta Khan, Mukunda Sanjay, and their all associates came to the Lord's house. They applied some medicinal oils to the Lord's head and tried to cure him any way they could. The Lord performed various pastimes by his own sweet will. How can he be cured? By some external remedies. All the limbs of the Lord shivered. He shouted loudly in such a way that everyone was frightened. He then declared, "I am the Lord of all. I maintain the universe. Therefore I am named Vishvambar. I am the Supreme Lord, but no one recognizes me." Saying this, the Lord tottered and everyone tried to catch him. In this way, the Lord manifested himself on the pretext of gastric disorder. Yet, by the influence of his illusory energy, no one could understand him. Someone said, "He's been possessed by a demon." Someone else said, "This is the work of a witch." Another said, "Since he's always speaking, it's certainly a gastric disorder." In this way, everyone gave different opinions, but by the influence of the Lord's illusory potency, no one could understand the truth. They applied various medicated oils on the Lord's head, and then they put him in a wooden tub filled with oil and rubbed his body. Immersed in that oil, the Lord began to laugh, as if a terrible gastric disorder had actually infected him. While thus enjoying his pastimes according to his own will, the Lord became normal, as if relieved of his gastric disorder. Everyone then chanted the names Hari in ecstasy, and in jubilation they distributed cloth to one another without discrimination. Everyone was pleased to hear about the Lord's recovery, and they blessed him. Such a scholar should live a long life. Remember, this is community of Brahmins. In this way, the Lord of Vaikuntha enjoyed his pastimes. Who can understand those pastimes unless the Lord reveals them? When all the Vaishnavas saw the Lord, they told him, "Dear Nimai, please worship the lotus feet of Krishna. This body is temporary. It may be vanquished the next moment, but you are a sober person. What can we teach you?" The Lord smiled at the Vaishnavas and offered them obeisances. Then he left for school with his students. The Lord taught his students in the Chandi Mandap within the courtyard of the fortunate Mukunda Sanjay. As the Lord began to teach, his head was smeared with fragrant medicated oil that was given by some pious person. Nimai, the life of the universe, sat and taught. In the midst of his many fortunate students, I am unable to describe or give a comparison for that wonderful scene. It appeared that Lord Narayana was sitting in Badrikashram, surrounded by his disciples headed by Shaunaka, Sanaka. Lord Gauranga now enjoyed the same pastimes as Lord Narayana personally taught his disciples. Sri Sachinandana is certainly that same Lord Narayana who resides in Badrikashram. Therefore, the Lord of Vaikuntha enjoyed those same pastimes while relishing scholastic pleasures with his students. After teaching at midday, the Lord would take his students for bath in the Ganges. The Lord sported in the waters of the Ganges for some time and then returned home to worship Lord Vishnu. Then, after wadding and circumambulating Tulsi, the Lord recited the name of Hari as he sat down to eat. Lakshmi, that's his wife, served rice. And the Lord of Vaikuntha ate. The pious mother Shachi watched to her full satisfaction. After finishing his meal, the Lord chewed betel nuts and then laid down while Lakshmi massaged his lotus feet. After taking some rest, the Lord again went out with his books. Nimai enjoyed various pastimes in the city and smiled as he talked with the residents. So now it's he's going to go as if a brahmana to marketplaces, or not just even marketplaces. In many cases, people conducted their business from their home. So he's going and asking for alms for as a brahmana, but doing it in a funny way. But he's actually giving them the opportunity to serve. From books to interactions with merchants. Although no one knew his real identity, the residents still offered him respects whenever they saw him. Although Sri Sachinandana is rarely seen by even the demigods, he now wandered throughout the streets of Navadwip within the sight of all. One day, the Lord went to the house of a weaver, and the weaver respectfully offered him obeisances, a Vaishya and a Brahmana. The Lord said, "Bring one nice piece of cloth." And the weaver immediately brought some cloth. The Lord then asked, "What is the price of this cloth?" The weaver replied, "Give me whatever you like." After settling the price, the Lord said, "I don't have any money right now." The weaver then said, "Oh, Gosai, you can give me in 10 or 15 days. You take the cloth and happily wear it. You can pay me whenever you please." After mercifully glancing at the weaver, the Lord continued on to the house of a cowherd. Mahaprabhu sat down on his veranda and began to make fun of the activities of the brahmanas. The Lord said, "O son, bring me some milk and yogurt. Today I'm going to accept charity from your house." The cowherd men thought Nimai looked just like Cupid. They respectfully offered him a nice asana. They began to joke with the Lord and address him as uncle. One of them said, "Come, uncle, Let us go eat some rice. Then one of them took Nimai on his shoulder and carried him to his house. Another said, don't you remember how you previously ate all the rice in my house? Although the cowherd boys didn't realize it, by the grace of the transcendental goddess of learning, Saraswati, whatever they spoke was true. Meanwhile, Nimai simply smiled at their words. All the gopas then happily offered the Lord milk, ghee, yogurt, cream, and butter. After being satisfied by the gopas, the Lord went to the house of a perfume merchant. The merchant offered his respectful obeisances to the Lord, who said, "O brother, bring me some of your best perfume." The perfume merchant immediately brought some of his best perfume, and Sri Sachinandan inquired, "What is the price?" The merchant replied, "You know, my dear sir, is it befitting of me to take money from you? Today you apply this oil and go home. If, after taking bath tomorrow, the fragrance still remains, then you may pay me whatever you like." After saying this, the merchant happily applied the perfume on the body of the Lord. The Lord is the super soul of all living entities. Therefore, he attracts the mind of all. Who is not attracted by seeing his beautiful form? Vishvambar bestowed his mercy on the merchant and then continued on to the house of a florist. When the florist saw Nimai's most wonderful form, he offered him obeisances and a place to sit. The Lord said, "O florist, I would like a nice garland, but I have no money with me." Appreciating that Nimai had the symptoms of a spiritually perfect soul, the florist said, "You don't need to pay." After saying this, the florist garlanded the Lord, who smiled in the company of his students. After casting his merciful glance on the florist, Gauranga went to the house of a betel nut merchant. The merchant saw Nimai's form as more enchanting than that of Cupid. He took dust from Nimai's feet and offered him a place to sit. The merchant said, "It is my great fortune that you have come to my house, insignificant as I am." In full satisfaction, without being asked, the merchant then offered betel nut to the Lord, who smiled. The Lord then said, "Why did you give me betel without payment?" The merchant replied, "I was inspired to." The Lord smiled on hearing the merchant's reply, and he chewed the betel nut with great satisfaction. The merchant then devotedly offered Nimai some pan, camphor, and other spices free of cost. After blessing the merchant, Gaura smiled as he continued wandering the streets of Navadwip. The city of Navadwip was just like Mathura. Millions of people belonging to different castes lived there. For the pleasure of the Lord, the Creator had previously supplied Navadwip with all opulences. The son of Shachi now enjoyed the same pastimes that Krishna had previously enjoyed while wandering the streets of Mathura. Thereafter, Gaura visited the house of a conch merchant who offered the Lord due respect. The Lord said, "Dear brother, let me see some beautiful conches, but alas, how will I take it? I have no money." Just then the merchant placed a beautiful conch in Nimai's hand and offered him obeisances. "O Gosai, take this conch home with you. You may pay me later or not, it doesn't matter." Pleased by the words of the conch merchant, the Lord glanced mercifully on him and departed. In this way, the Lord visited every house in Navadwip. If there's millions of people, he had lots of visits. For this reason, even today, the residents of Navadvip attain the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. The supremely independent Lord Gaurachandra then, this is fantastic, went to the house of an astrologer. As the astrologer saw the effulgence of the Lord, he humbly offered obeisances. The Lord asked him, "I've heard that you are a good astrologer. Could you please tell me who I was in my previous life?" The pious astrologer agreed to the Lord's request and began to chant the Gopal mantra within his mind. At that moment, the astrologer saw a beautiful, blackish personality with 4 hands holding the consciousness club and lotus flower. His chest was decorated with Srivatsa and brilliantly effulgent Kaustubha gem. He saw the Lord in the prison cell being offered prayers by his parents at the dead of night. He then saw Vasudeva carrying the Lord that night to Gokula. The astrologer again saw the Lord as an enchanting 2-armed, naked child with a string of small bells around his waist and butter in his 2 hands. The astrologer saw his worshipable Lord decorated with all the symptoms he had meditated on. He then again saw the threefold bending form of the Lord playing on his flute and surrounded on all sides by the gopis who were singing and playing various musical instruments. After seeing this wonderful vision, the astrologer opened his eyes and saw Gauranga standing before him. He then again entered into meditation. The astrologer said, "Oh, Balagopal, please listen. Quickly show me who this Brahmana was." The astrologer then saw the Lord with a greenish durva grass complexion, holding a bow in his hand and sitting on a royal throne. Thereafter, he saw the Lord in the middle of the waters of devastation. He had the wonderful form of a boar, and he held the earth on his tusks. He then saw the Lord as Nrsimha. Although he appeared most ferocious, he was the ultimate well-wisher of his devotees. Next, he saw the form of Vamana, waiting to deceive Bali at his sacrifice. He then saw the form of Matsya, happily sporting in the waters of devastation. The pious astrologer then saw the intoxicated form of Lord Balaram holding a plow and club in his hands. He next saw the form of Jagannath with Balaram on his right and Subhadra in between. In this way, the astrologer saw the Lord's various incarnations, but due to the Lord's illusory energy, he was unable to ascertain the meaning of what he had seen. The astrologer was struck with wonder and thought, "I think that this Brahmana is expert in chanting of mantras. Otherwise, he may be a demigod who has come disguised as a Brahmana to test me. I see a supernatural effulgence emanating from the body of the Brahmana. Has he come to discredit me?" The Lord smiled and asked the thoughtful astrologer, "Who am I? What did you see? Tell me everything in detail." The astrologer said, "You please go home for now. I will tell you everything in the afternoon after I peacefully chant my mantra." Smiling, the Lord agreed to the astrologer's request and went to the house of his dear devotee, Sridhar. All of this is leading up to the Sridhar story. His very dear devotee, Kulavechar Sridhar. It's one of my favorite, that's why I'm reading it. Relationships of Lord Chaitanya. Very, very sweet. Very mysterious. Sridhar was very dear to the Lord's heart, and the Lord would therefore visit him on various pretexts. The Lord would tease Sridhar in the course of their regular conversations, which would last for an hour or two. This is like every day. When Sridhar saw that Nimai had arrived, he offered him obeisances and a place to sit. Sridhar was always peaceful in his behavior, while the Lord enjoyed playing the role of an agitated young man. The Lord said, Sridhar, you always chant the name of Hari. So, why are you always afflicted by poverty? Can you please tell me why, after serving the beloved Lord of Lakshmi, you do not get sufficient food and clothes? Sridhar replied, at least I'm not starving, and whatever small or large, I'm wearing some cloth. The Lord said, but I see your cloth is mended in 10 places, and the roof of your cottage has no straw. Look at other people. They worship Chandi or Vishahari, so they have no scarcity for food or cloth. Sridhar then replied, O Brahmana, what you say is indeed correct. Yet, time passes equally for everyone. The king has jewels in his house, and he eats opulent food. Meanwhile, the birds live in trees. Yet time passes equally for everyone, as they all enjoy the fruits of their previous activities by the will of the Lord. 2-page purport. The Lord then said, you have great wealth that you are secretly enjoying. I will soon disclose this to everyone. Krishna Prema. Then how will you cheat us? Sridhar said, oh, Pandit, please go home now. It's not proper for us to argue. The Lord said, I'm not going to leave you so easily. Please tell me what you'll give me. He's so poor. And he's commenting how he's so poor. Now he wants him to give him something. Sridhar said, I maintain myself by selling leaf cups. So tell me, what can I give you, Gosai? The Lord said, let your hidden treasure remain for now. I'll take that later. For now, give me some bananas, banana flowers, and banana stalks free of charge. Then I won't argue with you. Sridhar thought, this Brahmin is very aggressive. I'm afraid that one day he will beat me. But even if he beats me, what can I do to a Brahmana? At the same time, I can't supply him free of charge every day. Anyway, whatever this Brahmana takes, by force or deceit, that is my good fortune. So I'll continue to give him every day. Thinking in this way, Sridhar said, listen, Gosai, don't worry about money. I'll happily give you some bananas, banana flowers, leaf cups, and banana stalks. But please, don't fight with me. The Lord said, good. Then I won't fight anymore. But see that I get good quality bananas and banana stalks. The Lord daily used Sridhar's leaf cups, and he ate sabjis made from Sridhar's plantains, banana flowers, and banana stalks. Whenever a squash grew on the roof of Sridhar's cottage, the Lord would eat it, cooked with milk and black pepper. The Lord then said, "Tell me, what do you think of me? After you answer this, I'll go home." Sridhar replied, "You are a Brahmana, a portion of Lord Vishnu." The Lord said, "You don't know. Actually, I'm from a Gopa family. Although you see me as the son of a Brahmana, I consider myself a cowherd boy." Sridhar smiled at the Lord's words, but due to the illusory energy, he could not recognize his Lord. The Lord then said, "Sridhar, let me tell you the truth. The glories of your Ganges are due to me." Sridhar replied, "Nimai, Pandit, aren't you afraid of insulting Ganga in this way? One is supposed to become sober as he grows up, but I see that your restlessness is doubled." After joking with Sridhar in this way, Lord Gauranga returned to his home. Sri Gauranga sat down at the door of his Vishnu temple, and his students all returned to their homes. As Nimai saw the full moon one night, his heart became absorbed in the mood of Vrindavan Chandra. Nimai then began to play a flute in a most enchanting tune, which only Mother Sachi could hear. When Mother Sachi heard the sound of that flute, which attracts the three worlds, she fell unconscious in ecstasy. After a while, she regained consciousness and steadied her mind as she continued listening to the wonderful sound of the flute. Sachi then noticed that the enchanting sound of the flute was coming from the direction where Nimai was sitting. Mother Sachi came outside in astonishment and saw that her son was sitting at the door of the Vishnu temple. She could no longer hear the sound of the flute, but she saw the full moon on the chest of her son. Seeing the moon on the chest of her son, Sachi was struck with wonder and began looking around. Mother Sachi then went back inside and began to think about the reason for such a vision. In this way, the most fortunate Mother Sachi saw unlimited manifestations of opulence. One night, Sachi heard hundreds of people singing and playing musical instruments. By the sound of dancing and various wind instruments, she considered that a grand Rasalila festival was taking place. One day, all she could see was a brilliant spiritual effulgence permeating her house. On another day, she saw many divine women who all held lotus flowers in their hands and resembled the goddess of fortune. One day, she saw the effulgent demigods, but when she looked again, she couldn't see them. It was not astonishing that Sachi had such visions, for the Vedas describe her as the personification of devotional service to Lord Vishnu. Whoever receives the merciful glance of Mother Sachi becomes eligible to see such opulences. In this way, Sri Gaura Sundara, who is not different from Lord Krishna, lived in Navadwip incognito while relishing his own ecstasy. Although the Lord manifested his opulences in various ways, his servants were still unable to recognize him. The arrogance that was sportingly displayed by Nimai was unmatched throughout Navadwip. The pastimes enjoyed are supreme in all respects. Whenever the Lord desired to fight, he becomes the topmost hero, and no one can surpass his prowess with weapons. Whenever the Lord desires to enjoy conjugal pastimes, He manifests millions of beautiful women. Whenever the Lord desires to enjoy opulence, he fills his servants' homes with millions of oceans of wealth. In this way, the arrogant nature, now manifest by the Lord, immediately vanished when he accepted the path of renunciation. At that time, not even a fragment of the renunciation and devotion that he manifest could be found throughout the three worlds. Is it possible for anyone else? The activities of the Lord are supreme in all respects, but it is his nature to accept defeat at the hands of his devotees. One day, Nimai, along with 5 or 7 students, were walking down the main road. Nimai was dressed like a king. The yellow cloth that covered his body made him look just like Krishna. As he chewed betel nut, his face resembled millions of moons. People who saw him inquired, "Is he Cupid?" His forehead was decorated with tilak, and in his hands he carried some books. A glance from his lotus eyes destroyed all sins. As the restless-natured Lord walked along with his students, his arms swung back and forth. By providence, Srivas Pandit was coming from the opposite direction at that time. Upon seeing the Lord, Srivas began to laugh loudly. Nimai offered obeisance to Srivas, who blessed Nimai by saying, "Live forever." Srivas smiled and inquired, "Oh, best of the arrogant, where are you going? Why do you uselessly waste your time by not worshipping Krishna? Why do you spend day and night simply teaching mundane knowledge? Why do people study? Education is only for understanding devotional service of Lord Krishna. Therefore, don't uselessly waste your time any longer. You've studied enough. Now you should worship Krishna." Nimai smiled and said, "Listen, Pandit, that will certainly be done by your mercy." After speaking in this way, Mahaprabhu smiled and departed for the bank of the Ganges, where he met his students. There's not too much left in the chapter. Sri Satchidananda then sat on the bank of the Ganges with his students surrounding him on all sides. I could not describe the beauty of that scene, even if I had millions of mouths. There is no comparison in the three worlds. I cannot compare that scene with the moon, surrounded by stars, because the moon has spots, and it also waxes and wanes. This Lord, however, is eternally complete and spotless, therefore a comparison with the moon is unjustified. I cannot compare Nimai with even Brihaspati, because Brihaspati is partial to the demigods. This Lord, however, is partial to everyone, and therefore comparison with Brihaspati is also unjustified. Nor can I compare Nimai with Cupid, because if Cupid appears in one's heart, the heart becomes agitated. When this Lord appears in one's heart, however, all one's material bondage is destroyed, and his heart becomes pure and happy. Therefore, all these comparisons are improper. But there is one comparison that I can think of. You want to know what that one is? Just as the son of Nanda enjoyed his pastimes sitting among the cowherd boys on the bank of the Yamuna, that same Krishna, in the form of a Brahmana, now enjoyed pastimes sitting with those same cowherd boys on the bank of the Ganges. Whoever saw the Lord's face as he sat on the bank of the Ganges attained indescribable happiness. Seeing the Lord's extraordinary effulgence, everyone on the bank of the Ganges began to whisper to one another. Someone said, "An ordinary human being does not have such effulgence." Someone else said, "This Brahmana is a portion of Lord Vishnu." Another said, "I think he will fulfill the prediction that a Brahmana will become the king of Gauda, for he has the symptoms of a king." In this way, everyone spoke according to their understanding. Meanwhile, the Lord pointed out the faults in the other teachers as he engaged in explaining the scriptures on the bank of the Ganges. Nimai established correct statements as incorrect and incorrect statements as correct. Then, after refuting all other explanations, he again established the proper meaning with new explanations. The Lord said, "I consider a person learned if he is able to discuss with me. Who has the power to refute me by establishing a different explanation?" As the Supreme Lord exhibited his pride in this way, he smashed the pride of all others. The Lord had innumerable students who studied in groups under his direction. Every day, 10 or 20 Brahmana boys came to offer obeisances to the Lord. They would say, "O Pandit, we wish to study with you. Please be merciful so that we may learn something." The Lord smiled and said, "Good, good." Thus the number of students increased day by day. The Lord of Vaikuntha would sit amidst the circle of his students on the bank of the Ganges. Fortunate people watched from all sides, and by the influence of the Lord, the entire city of Navadwip became free from lamentation. Who can calculate the good fortune of the pious souls who saw those pastimes? Just by seeing a pious soul who has seen those pastimes, one is freed from material bondage. My sinful birth did not take place at that time. This is Vrindavan Das, because he was very, very small, just a baby. Therefore, I was cheated from seeing those pastimes. Still, oh Gaurachandra, please be merciful to me, so that I may remember those pastimes, birth after birth. Wherever you and Nityananda perform pastimes with your associates, may I be present there as a servant. Last line. Accepting Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu as my life and soul, I, Vrindavan Das, sing the glories of their lotus feet. Sridhar, cultivate your Sridhar. He, it is said, he was very poor. And his income was, around where his cottage was, there were some banana trees. And those who have been to Bengal or Mayapur area, there's lots of banana trees. You know, the bananas grow on the trees, and people can just go pick the bananas from the banana trees. But he would take the leaves from the banana trees and make leaf plates and leaf cups and banana stalks and banana flowers and bananas and just what came from, there's no overhead. Just climb up the tree and get these things and sit by the bank of the Ganges and sell them. And whatever it is that he received that day, half was for the worship of the Ganges. And all night long, he would chant the name of Hari. Later, there's a description in Chaitanya Charitamrita when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performed his Mahaprakash Leela. His Mahaprakash Leela is when he decided to show the devotees his divinity, instead of just being a Vaishnav that was ecstatic in love of God. So one evening at the house of, at the house of Shivas, they would have kirtan. Go on all night long, very loud, but they locked the gate so only qualified people could come. There's many things that happened. The people that weren't permitted, they were envious and they did bad things. We won't go into it. To demonstrate to Shivas and those that were concerned about the harassment that may come to them, he sat on the altar, says the throne, but he sat on the altar and ordered everybody in a booming voice, worship me. So they were ready. They, went and got clay pots and hundreds of clay pots and abhishek right there on the altar and everything, the whole worship, everything. And then the kirtan continued, and he invited one by one each devotee to come forward and identify who their eternal position was and disclose details about them that no one else knew. So in the course of this really wonderful section, in the course of all of that, he wanted someone to go get Sridhar. And he, if you know where Shivas Pandit's home is, and where Kolavechar Sridhar's home was, it's out by the Jagannath Mandir. It's quite a trek, and there are no street lights at that time. So he said, just as you get closer, you hear him chanting loudly the holy name. Just follow the sound of the name, and you'll find Sridhar all night long, all night long. And they brought him. He was very shy. And when he came, the exchange with Sridhar was, ask whatever you want from me. No, I don't. I'll give you a kingdom. I'll give you wealth. Say whatever it is, it's yours. And then his final request was, just birth after birth, you please come and tease me and torment me and treat me however you like, and let me just be your servant, birth after birth. So it looked like unpleasant, but it wasn't unpleasant. It wasn't intended to be unpleasant. It wasn't unpleasant. It was joyous, including for Sridhar, although it's part of the exchange to say what he said and part of the exchange to say what Nimai said. It's a loving exchange. Two other very nice features of Kolavechar Sridhar. At some point, the envious brahmanas, smarta brahmanas, went and complained to the Kazi to say, what he's doing is in violation of Hindu principles. There's nowhere in the Hindu scriptures just to say to do what he's doing. He's destroying our religion. You have to stop him. So he had his constables go and stop the kirtan and instructed them if they continued, they'd all be in big trouble, and broke a mridanga. And that event came to Nimai Pandit's attention, and so overnight, he arranged what Prabhupada calls the first civil disobedience movement. Tens of thousands of angry Bengalis, look out, with torches because they were going to go until at night, and they came out beneath the window of the Kazi, who was hiding under his bed for fear of his life. And they exchanged. Lord Chaitanya coaxed him to come down, and they had some discussion. And the Kazi revealed that Lord Nrsingadev had paid him a visit that night. He opened his shirt and showed the scratches on his chest from his nails, and threatened him, "I should kill you, but I'll let you live. Just never do this again." So from this day forward, the chanting of the holy name can be heard throughout the whole of Navadwip, and for as many generations as can follow me to continue in this same position, that instruction goes for them also. So big kirtan. And so it's a very significant, dramatic event. And just after that, in the dead of night again, Lord Chaitanya went, the next thing, he went to Sridhar's home that night. And he told Sridhar, "I'm thirsty, give me some water." I mean, it was purposeful, because he was poor. So all he had was a clunky old iron pot with holes in it. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu picked up the iron pot and started to drink from it. And Sridhar was saying, no, this isn't fit for you. But the love that he had for Sridhar was exceptional. And one more, the very evening that he took sannyas, Sridhar brought from his home a squash that had grown on his roof. I mean, if you've been to Bengal, you've seen the vines grow, and at some point some squash becomes ripe, and so he picked the ripe squash, brought it to his home. Lakshmi cooked with milk and pepper, and he ate that night, and in the middle of the night is when he left. He had a very significant and sweet role to play in Lord Chaitanya's Navadwip Leela. We don't hear about him after he left. There may be some narrations that I'm unaware of, but while he was there, he was a very loved devotee. So during his student pastimes, those exchanges, during his devotee pastimes, those exchanges, and at the time of his sannyas, and that marks the departure from Navadwip. What we're hearing from this is now. What I'm thinking to do is in the evenings, or when we have home gatherings other than Gaur Purnima Day, just to read, because Vrindavan Das Thakur is said to be the Vyasa of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, as Vyasadeva is the describer of Krishna's pastimes in Srimad Bhagavatam. Actually, the title of the book was changed. He called it Chaitanya Mangala, and then later, the author of Chaitanya Mangala changed it to Chaitanya Bhagavat, because he's the Vyas of Gaura Leela. So it became Chaitanya Bhagavat instead of Chaitanya Mangala. And he had, obviously, he has such love, and he had access to the pastimes because of his mother and the whole situation, his connection with Srivas Pandit's family. And his style is absolutely spontaneous. He makes no intention of trying to convince worldly people anything. He just, one explosion after the next explosion after the next explosion of ecstatic expressions of his love for Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda and the other devotees. Very joyful mood. transcendental pastimes. See if there's any reflections or some comments or discussion. It's not a philosophy class, it's a pastime class.
We're still reading from going to Navadwip. Thank you so much for taking us there.
What are you reading from?
Being there in Navadwip
Oh,
through your discussion and your lecture this
Oh.
evening. Thank you for
Oh.
transporting us to there and bringing
Yeah,
us.
everything just
So we don't
kinda-
want to come back.
everything just kind of like you lose track of where you were and you go to another place. I see, okay.
Guru Maharaj, so like Kulavechya Sridhar, the other personalities that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu paid visit to, including the BeetleNet man and the clothes merchant and so on, obviously they also must have been some very special and exalted
Yeah.
personalities. So
Yes.
any further insights in terms of who and what?
Gaura Katha identifies who's who in very specific terms. Now, what I didn't do, I should have done. If somebody has a Gaura Katha on their phone and they can access who was Kulavechya Sridhar and Gaura Leela, I forget. But in general, what Vrindavan Das has done is just indicated their personalities in Krishna's Leela. The cowherd, the students were cowherd boys, and the people in Navadwip were the people of Mathura. And they're different merchants, because different merchants that Krishna went to visit when he went to Mathura. There's not further explanation other than they're very fortunate. And how did they become fortunate? They have that Krita Punya Punja. They had many, 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 many lifetimes of service or pious activities, not just material pious activities, but service opportunities. And they are beyond the position of demigods, but the position of elevated souls that are directly seeing and interacting with Lord Chaitanya, each with their different mood, because their occupation is Vaishyas. But, Vaishyas can't survive if they don't receive something. But, the seeing Lord Chaitanya. So they had different ways of being elevated to the platform of service. But your question specifically is, who are they? They're associates of the Lord, just in that position, in some way or another, to do some humble service and get his merciful glance and association. You found it? What is it?
The cowherd boy named Kusumasava, who joked with Lord Krishna and made him laugh in Vrajabhumi, appeared
Made him what?
Made him laugh.
Yeah,
Laugh.
laugh. Yeah. And what?
In Vrajabhumi,
In Brajabhumi, okay.
appeared in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes as a learned Brahmana named Kulavechya Sridhar.
A learned Brahmana. Wait a minute. He's a humble Vaishya. Maybe it's a different Sridhar.
Snehavalli Mataji also found the same reference.
Okay. Well, he's not a learned Brahmana. He's a humble Vaishya. Very clearly, he's a humble Vaishya. Snehavali, see if you can find some other reference. Instead of you asking me, how come it says this and that? Anything else?
There's
You have
an
something?
unrelated question.
Okay.
Kirti Prabhu's question from the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam,
Shui. Okay.
glorifying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In Bhagavatam introduction, Srila Prabhupada says that the Supreme Personality glanced over material nature to create material cosmic creation. His glance is not material but transcendental. Later he says material energy is inferior, which sprouted out of ignorance. The Lord is transcendental and is the source of material energy. What does material energy sprouted out of ignorance mean?
Well, it's I've been hearing the Nectar Devotion series of Srila Prabhupada speaking in 1972. And anyone that's heard Prabhupada speaking, he makes a point and he says it like 5, 6, 7 times. And there's opportunity for someone to disagree, but they better not disagree because you'll be wrong. And so he was saying there's no question of material energy, which it seems like that's what Kirti is asking. Because if something comes from that which is spiritual, how can it be material? And Prabhupada was saying that point in this Nectar Devotion series. Spiritual means forgetfulness of Krishna. Material means forgetfulness of Krishna. But actually there's nothing spiritual. There's nothing. Material means forgetfulness of Krishna, but there's actually nothing material. Because everything is from Krishna. How can you, the argument, they would say it 6 times. How can you, from spiritual, you get material? So, that's the one side. And then the other side is Krishna has unlimited potencies. One of them is the avidya shakti. And so material means forgetfulness of Krishna, avidya shakti, that which causes or induces forgetfulness. But that very same thing, using Prabhupada's favorite example, the microphone, it's material. However, when it's used in service to Krishna, then it's spiritual, or it's spiritualized, but it's spiritual. So creation and the whole of Prakriti is one of Krishna's energies, but it's apara. It's not conscious. And it's always undergoing change. It's unlike spirit that's unchanging and eternal. So there's a distinction between energies, and that's what happens in the course of creation, or his glance, etc. So this lesser energy or inferior energy or not conscious energy, the microphone's not conscious, or the floor is not conscious, or, matter is not conscious. Matter is moved by the conscious spirit. So behind the unconscious temporary matter, there's the source. So there's the distinction. It's spiritual and it's not spiritual, it's material. That's what material means, that which induces forgetfulness. Anything else?
Maharaj, I was just thinking about the devotees of Lord Chaitanya, how merciful, how compassionate and they were. And and then so how and what they were in Krishna Lila, as we see in the case of the Goswamis, they were manjaris, and how in Krishna Lila, these gopis and manjaris, the mood of selfless, total selfless service,
Yes.
like they absolutely had no desire to gratify their own senses, just the pastimes, of enhancing the pastimes rather than Krishna. And we see that same mood in the Goswamis, how wonderful
Yes.
this selfless mood was. And but it seems like in Gaura Leela that is so much more pronounced, just because we can relate with that so much more, in terms of
The mood
Lord.
is different.
Yes.
The mood is Mahapadanyaya, and his followers carried that mood from him.
Yes. So I was just thinking if you can just expand a little bit on that.
Sure. This evening's reading and tomorrow evening's reading is going to be the next chapter. It's dealing with the Digvijay Pandit from Kashmir. So it's the scholarly pastimes. But even in dealing with Keshava Kashmiri, it was very respectful. Conclusive, and he changed the person completely. But as we just read, the scholarly pastimes later just disappeared for the devotional pastimes. He just lost all interest. He continued teaching grammar, but he continued teaching grammar only because the students were begging him to teach grammar, and then it just became Krishna conscious lessons because that was his consciousness. So the gift through his pastimes as a devotee, the gift was love for Krishna. Like we're hearing already, when will that day come when you become Krishna's devotee? Why are you wasting your time? When he became Krishna's devotee, it just was give the gift of Krishna. Like that nice instruction, I believe it's in Chaitanya Bhagavat, where he instructed, Lord Chaitanya instructed Nityananda and Haridas. Very simple. Go to whoever you meet and tell them, chant Krishna's name, worship Krishna, remember Krishna, Krishna is your life and soul. Don't utter anything else. Just do that. And that's when he was just getting started. The expansion of the mercy that just continued and continued and continued. And the far more matured stage came from the Goswamis and the followers of the Goswamis and the followers of the followers of the Goswamis and the next generations and next generations. Because that was the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the most exalted form were the Goswamis. And others, but the Goswamis, and then their books and their ways of teaching people how to awaken that type of consciousness. Love for Krishna in the spontaneous mood of the residents of Vrindavan. That's what they want to give. That's what's been given to us. In thinking about your question, and listening to your question, I was thinking about the Rath Yatra pastime. The Rath Yatra pastime is fun. I mean, children can take part. And the kirtan, and the distribution of prasadam, and the dancing, and the Jagannath up on the cart, and it's a nice festival. But I remember very clearly the very first Rath Yatra in New York. Prabhupada was there. When he got on the stage, he told the whole story of bringing the mood of Lord Chaitanya, being wanting in the mood of Radharani, wanting to bring Krishna back to Vrindavan. There's a whole other level of appreciation of what Rath Yatra is. So just like deity worship has its regulative purification aspect. And as that regulation and purification aspect, when one becomes purified, there's a spontaneous kind of worship. And that spontaneous kind of worship was what Lord Chaitanya was giving. Not to be imitated, just like his worship of Govardhan. We don't imitate how we worship Govardhan. We worship Govardhan. And then there's different ideas of, amongst Vaishnavas, there are different ideas of how to worship Govardhan. And I don't know if any of you had a chance to hear, but Madhavananda lives in Puri, gave a 1 hour discussion he said was like a capsulization of 30 years of research and very thorough, comprehensive research on the mood of Govardhan. And is the mood of Govardhan Hari, or and we should worship him because he's Hari? Or the mood of Govardhan is a devotee? And he got really esoteric, but it's the mood of the gopis. And that's how Raghunath Das in his prayers saw, because it's in his prayers. Anyway, so there's levels of everything. And, the gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and those that deeply understood the gift of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they're giving that gift. And the gift that's being given by those that understood deeply the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can be for everybody. It can be just the purification that's needed to get one's senses regulated and purified. Again, I'm hearing it the third time. Somehow, in those little red boxes that have all the recorded lectures, they have it 3 times. It's listed differently, but it's so I'm hearing it for the 3rd time. The yogis, they're very interested in controlling the senses. The devotees don't have that same. We don't all the austerities. That's not the focus. The focus is pleasing Krishna. And when the focus of pleasing Krishna is there, then control of the senses is there. And that's, the gift of Lord Chaitanya and the followers of Lord Chaitanya. Not like they didn't follow regulations, but that wasn't the emphasis. They followed regulations. Look at, the intense Raghunath Das and Sanatana Goswami, and their vratas were like lines in stone. It said for both of them. And they were on the spontaneous platform. So one can see what they did and go, let me look up to them because that will help me. But then keep going, keep going, keep going. The gift that Lord Chaitanya gave and his followers gave is very high. And one doesn't have to be very high. One can think, wow, that's too high. You don't have to be very high. You just have to be respectful and devoted and according to your position, hear and understand and apply, and then become purified and go the next step, go the next step. up to the stage of loving Krishna in Vrindavan, amongst the eternal associates of Krishna. Compassion. Just yesterday, I was at a home, 9 or 10-year-old girl. All the adults asked her question, then it was her turn. She pulled out a piece of paper. She had 6 questions written down. The first question is, how can I increase compassion? So for a 10-year-old girl, it's not the same as the 6 Goswamis. But you go down that path, and that's where it goes. Lord Chaitanya and the followers of Lord Chaitanya, that's where that path goes. You start wherever you are. But if guided by those elevated persons, that's where it's going to take you. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much for giving us this wonderful immersion in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's.
Just reading. Thank Vrindavan Das Thakur.
But please accept my humble obeisances. I have a question regarding how to introduce Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to newcomers, meaning I have a group, my family members are joining my Telugu Bhagavad Gita reading group, and we are in 2nd chapter. So Gaur Purnima is coming up, and I was wondering maybe is this a good time to introduce to them, or should I wait?
I don't know them, so I can't say, but depending upon their receptivity, I mean, they know that you're into something.
Yes.
And people know that a relative is into something. They're curious, but they're a little they don't want to be overwhelmed.
Yes, I understand.
They don't want to be preached to, or converted, or there's different.
Yes.
That's common. There, different people are different.
That defense, I see that defense coming sometimes.
Okay, so don't be. So you just depends on the individual or the group of individuals. Thinking of the word titrate, just little by little. Where in case you're interested, there's a big party.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're having a big celebration in honor of Krishna appearing as his own devotee, Lord Chaitanya. Very special day.
Okay, Guru.
And it depends on what's going to strike their fancy, without them feeling that you're trying to twist their arm and convert them or something.
Yes, well, thank you, Maharaj. I understand.
If they ask, then you can say. And then even when you say, don't say too much. Modest. And smile.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. As you were describing about Vrindavan Das Thakur's style, he doesn't want to convince anyone, no logic, just his ecstasy. It's very sweet, Guru Maharaj, to hear these pastimes. Same thing with the 10th canto discussions that you have done here in Naperville last year. I was thinking about reading Srila Prabhupada books very carefully, scrutinizingly. As I'm hearing, it's just hearing with the heart and appreciating, no logic, no intellect. If I start putting that, I would go to some other place. how do I apply where I have to read scrutinizingly, where I have to just forget about my whatever little intellect and just hear with the heart?
I'm inclined to say my standard answer, it depends. There's different teachers and different teachings. And the teacher style of Vrindavan Das doesn't lend itself to it. There's a fundamental assumption that he has that he doesn't make, as far as I can recall. There's no effort to convince anybody of anything. But the fundamental understanding is that the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality Godhead, has unlimited and inconceivable potencies. That's the Bhagavan conception. He has unlimited and inconceivable potencies. With that assumption, anything goes. So, the rational, analytical part, when you hit something, you hit a wall, you could like, what? Unlimited and inconceivable. And, then there's others. Bhakta Vatsala. He loves his devotees. Even when it looks like he's teasing or he's being arrogant or something, it's loving his devotees. And it's just, there's certain givens. And when those givens are there in his style, how it strikes me, he makes no effort to address the logical person that wants to be convinced that in fact the personality of Godhead has unlimited and inconceivable potencies. If there's a person that kind of person needs another teacher, because he's not going to do it. He doesn't do it. Whether he can or not is another thing. He doesn't do it. He moves the heart, because that's where he's coming from. He's on that spontaneous platform, and persons that are appreciating the spontaneous platform, they'll move with that spontaneous expression. So in response to your question, when depends on the teacher and the teaching. Some teachings and some teachers, like Prabhupada would do, for example. My understanding, one of the dimensions of what Prabhupada was doing is he knew his audience. And his audience had been bamboozled by modern education, having faith in what happiness means and faith in science is going to bring happiness and bring knowledge. And so he blasted and blasted and blasted and blasted and blasted. And blasted. He didn't stop to clear away all that false shelter stuff. So one can listen to what he says and be a little bit analytical, because the purpose is for those minds that are oriented to, well, wait a minute, what about this and that? Anyway, so it depends on the teacher and the teaching. Sankhya philosophy requires the analytical element. And some people don't like it. Some people love it. I was surprised when older devotees said, that all these, the pastime things I can't follow. I want to hear, they really liked what we were doing with Uddhava Gita and all that very careful analysis. because it didn't get to the further chapters. We were just still on the beginning chapters of knowledge and detachment. They really liked it. And they shared with me, I have difficulty taking part in these discussions that it's just mostly leelas. You know, different people have, so there's different teachings for different teachers, and there are different audiences. And even with, in different times, Prabhupada would have a different emphasis. And often it was, very logical. He would give example, and then give an example, and give an example, and teach the precept, and give an example, and teach the precept, and give the example, and teach the precept, and stay on it till like, okay. And then he would move on. But he often stuck to a certain point. So he understood his audience, dull. And having faith in illusory conceptions. So very strong to smash those illusory conceptions, leaving access to a life of devotion. What's left? No, that's not all what he did, but that's a major part of what he did. Dismantling the illusion. And of course, impersonalism. So, my response again is it depends. You have to be sensitive to the teaching that's being presented and the teacher's style of teaching. And the same subject can be taught by a different teacher in a different way. So you receive from the teacher according to the teacher and your orientation towards that teacher. Something else? Anything online? No? Snehavali, what happened?
Snehavalli Mataji wrote, there is just one more Sridhar mentioned in verses 194 to 207, but that is Sridhara Brahmachari, who was a gopi in Krishna Lila.
Yeah.
There's no more Sridhar mentioned in Gaura Katha.
Okay.
I have an unrelated question.
Unrelated question, fine. Fine.
We were talking in a morning class about Junior Haridas and Shivananda Sen. There's one class in which Srila Prabhupada mentions that how Shivananda Sen had so many children, but Lord Chaitanya was very accepting and accepted him very nicely. And Junior Haridas, he made one mistake. He wasn't
even a mistake.
Mistake, yes.
But it was,
and Lord Chaitanya did not tolerate it because Lord Chaitanya does not tolerate hypocrisy.
right.
And so there's a question regarding that was that Junior Haridas was not trying, to our knowledge, he wasn't trying to be a hypocrite. He was, he had a slip. He made a mistake. So, kind of connecting with our discussion on compassion, it's is it really hypocrisy? And it seemed, and there was another devotee, I'm forgetting the name, that Lord Chaitanya also was very strict with, and then he begins to dance when he hears that Lord Chaitanya will accept him back in 1,000,000 years. Govinda, maybe in 1,000,000 lifetimes. Lord Chaitanya.
Mukunda.
Mukunda, yes. So we were trying to, we're not sure how to understand this Lord Chaitanya's mercy or his how we should understand it, because it also seems like then these devotees made a mistake by entering the renounced order of life and taking that risk. And one time I heard my Guru Maharaj actually say that, he said that we have to take the risk. One devotee was trying to decide to be brahmachari or not. He said we have to take the risk, just like people drive even though they know they can get into an accident. But just because they get into an accident doesn't mean that they don't try to drive. So risk is there. So it seems like these devotees took the risk, and should they have not?
Well, do you have a foundation for the statement that he slipped? Because my understanding is different than that. My understanding is that Lord Chaitanya was using him as an example, but later Lord Chaitanya accepted him and his singing, the beautiful singing, because he was a very dear devotee of Lord Chaitanya, and he was simply using him as an example. And what the slip was what? You know, he went to get some rice, and he was offering kindness to the lady that offered him the rice. But what was the slip? Was it really a slip, or was it something that Lord Chaitanya took the opportunity to teach everybody, because it said, Krishna Das Kaviraj says, after that, even in their dreams, the devotees would be afraid of inappropriately associating with a woman. They wouldn't even in their dreams think of it. So, you know, that it worked. The chastisement of Chota Haridas was for the benefit of everyone. And, you know, even the coldness, you know, he went and drowned himself. Good. For someone that's done what he's done, that's the only thing that you can do. I mean, what does drowning yourself do? So, and that can be misunderstood. And as far as I understand, it was misunderstood by one devotee who... So, the compassion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with Chota Haridas was to give him this special opportunity to be an example that Lord Chaitanya would teach, as if he was being harsh, as if he had deviated in some flagrant way, or even a mild way. So even a mild way, I don't want to see him ever again. And it was similar to what Mukunda did. Oh, when will I see him? Not for a million lifetimes. Dancing, dancing, dancing. I can see him again in a million lifetimes. So bring him back. He wanted Mukunda to stop this behavior of going hearing from the wrong people. It would pollute him. And it was, misdirected. So in different ways, in intimate, loving ways, like, a parent may, with their child, correct the child. And the child may think, oh, why are you correcting me? But I don't see that that the whole pastime was he made a slip. And that Lord Chaitanya was, making a lesson out of him because he made a slip. He was strict with those that take vows. You're meant to follow your vows, and don't get sloppy with your vows. Especially those who are in the sannyas order. Don't get sloppy with your vows. But look what Prabhupada did. Somebody was a teenager. Rishi Kumar was a teenager, and he gave him sannyas. Did Prabhupada really expect he'd be able to maintain as a teen? And he didn't. But during these, Prabhupada was saying during these 1972 classes, Rishi Kumar went to South Africa and he started a center in Durban as a sannyasi, 20 years old. So the topic is the topic of compassion. That's where it started. My understanding is he was Lord Chaitanya was compassionate in all these different cases because it was his nature. And the compassion to Chota Haridas was to allow him to be on the receiving end of chastisement that seemed like strident and extreme and radical for the purpose of having everybody sit straight. When it comes to male-female association. But he loved him. And he continued to extend that loving relationship even after his departure from his presence and from his body. He continued that loving relationship. And Mukunda, and each of the examples. Something further?
Maharaj, would it be a similar example of what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited towards his own mother?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to remember his name, the personal secretary of Advaita Acharya. And Lord Chaitanya said, I don't want to see him again. And Dwaita said, why are you showing him such special favor? You never did anything like that with me. You never would scold me or chastise me. But you're doing that to him. Okay, bring him here. Oh, look at it. Now it's double. But he wanted to teach something. Never take money from a worldly person because your mind becomes polluted.
Prabhupada's statement regarding hypocrisy in the case of like Shivananda Singh and Chota Haridas. Lord Chaitanya doesn't. So it's also, I guess, an example that we should avoid hypocrisy because we are taking a certain order, an announced order. And
Yes. And the householder should live properly, and the sannyasi should live properly. The brahmana should live properly. Kshatriya should live properly. Vaishya should live properly. Dedicated to Krishna. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.